Honestly, this has been a long time coming, but I think it's time that I actually take a hit at the men. Not because I have anything against men, because, well, I am a man, of course, but because there's a serious conversation that we definitely need to have, and for us to have it, I need to actually start by calling out a bunch of guys. And fortunately or unfortunately, this isn't even about relationships. It's just purely guy shit that we need to talk about. Although for the women, because I know there are women that listen to this episode, I'll have something for the women before I get there. But to kind of kick things off, I want to start by talking about couples, more so Japanese couples. So in Japan, apparently some men give their whole salary to their wives and get a monthly allowance as quote-unquote pocket money. Now, when I read a title like that on a caption that I saw on IG, I was thinking, you know what, this isn't something that would work in Nairobi. This isn't something that would work in Kenya. This isn't something that would work right now in 2024. But guess what? Apparently, it seems like it might be happening in Japan, and maybe there might be some good reasons why it should probably happen around here. But for me to talk about that, I also need to bring up its conditions, and before I can do any of that, I need to throw some love to myself. So,
the royal penis is clean, Your Highness.
So initially when I read this, I first thought, this probably sounds like a bad idea, but considering that there are people in Japan who've been doing this for years, maybe there is some merit to it. So I'll just read the caption that it came with real quick, then I can get into my thoughts on it. So it says, and I quote, "In Japan, traditional gender roles strongly influence household finances, with wives typically managing budgets even when both partners work. This study delves into the dynamics of Japanese households, where husbands often relinquish control of their salaries to their wives, receiving fixed allowances in return. Through personal accounts and data analysis, it explores the implications of this financial arrangement on family dynamics and individual well-being. The narrative highlights the experiences of Japanese men like Yoshihiro Nozawa and Taisaku Kubo, who surrender their salaries to their wives, receiving limited allowances in return. Despite being the breadwinners, they navigate strict budget constraints set by their spouses, impacting their daily lives and leisure activities." End quote. Okay, so one of the things that I saw in the comments, first of all, was the fact that people were saying this article was probably written by a woman, and women busy talking about how they sent the article to their husbands. But to be quite honest, this actually isn't too bad of a financial strategy for guys who are married. Don't get me wrong, it doesn't work with every single spouse or in every single marriage, and with a lot of people, it's probably a bad idea, but it can actually work. Now, it's not the first time I'm hearing of this sort of financial strategy in marriage. It's actually something that 50 Cent has mentioned before. I think it's just something that's mostly done by maybe boomers and maybe the generation that came before boomers. Because when 50 Cent was talking about it, he was talking about it in the situation of his grandparents that he lived with. And he spoke about how the grandfather would bring back his pay and he would give it to the grandmother, and the grandmother would separate the money for expenses and bills and shit, and then give him back some money afterwards. And for him, while he was young and he thought that was a bad idea, the grandfather told him that it allows him to be free, because from that money, if the grandmother wants to buy herself something nice, courtesy of him, then she can do that. So it's not like she'll be asking for more money from him or complaining that he doesn't do ABCD for her, because he gives her all of the money. And if you're looking at it from that angle, it's actually a pretty smart thing to do. It's just that in today's day and age, that seems like such a hard thing to do. But I personally believe that there are some women in today's day and age that you can trust like that, whereby you take your money, you give it to her, then she decides how she's going to split it for bills, and then she gives you back, some money for disposable income. The only problem is there's a lot of women today that are not financially savvy or financially responsible, so there's a very good chance they could just buy themselves shit and finish the money and be like, sa tutadu. Or they'll just end up clumping down so hard on bills and savings and other things that you have zero disposable income, or very little as a guy, because apparently, whatever it is that you're doing that you might consider fun with your friends is just looking like a waste of money to her. Although, then again, considering that I'm not married, maybe I can't say too much about this, so I'm just going to leave it at that and start the podcast with some money in my pocket by saying, welcome to the Breakdown Podcast, where I talk about love, sex, and relationships from a guy's perspective, as well as a bunch of other guy shit. The man on the mic is a man who likes to put his money where his mouth is, and unfortunately, that means that he can't eat pussy. He's a man who still believes in adding running your mouth to the cardio routine. It is none other than a tall, dark, and mildly handsome man, Sir Denver B. This show has started in a nice way where, I'm talking about two people coming together and sharing in finances, but I'm about to deconstruct this bitch because I need to talk about the women separate, I need to talk about the men separately, and the men might not like me for this, but we just have to start calling each other out at this point because we have a lot that we need to talk about. But before I can do that, and also because I'm a gentleman, I'm gonna go with the whole ladies first approach and talk about the ladies for a little bit. Now, very recently, there was a survey that was done to show the top brands in Kenya that are loved by Kenyans, and apparently, M-Pesa was seen as the most loved brand by Kenyan women. Now, I'm not gonna lie, when I read that, when I was hearing about it, it actually sounded funny at first, but if anything, it wasn't surprising. I feel like if it was going to go to the men, maybe we might have had, a bit of a competition between M-Pesa and Arimis, but, that's a little bit debatable. But for the most part, looking at M-Pesa as the most loved brand by Kenyan women isn't surprising, just mostly because a bunch of women nowadays, you just see them posting up on IG and they're talking about how they're under so much stress and M-Pesa would make them feel better. Which, to be honest, doesn't sound like something that would make too much sense, but considering that I'm a guy and I'd want the same thing, I guess I can probably see the math in it, or the logic in it, to a certain degree. But the interesting part about it wasn't even that M-Pesa was a top brand, it's the other brands that came on the top 10 list. So M-Pesa was right at the top, Safaricom came in second, and honestly I feel like both of those brands are very interchangeable because they're all owned by the same company. So technically that was Safaricom and M-Pesa at first. Then the third one was actually Equity Bank. Alright, that one I did not expect, mostly because people just talk about the long ass queues and the fact that, it always feels like it's gonna take forever for you to get attended to whenever you go to a branch. But I guess women maybe don't mind the waiting game. Then number 4 was Samsung. Number 5 was Ajab, which we use for our chapos, so yay for the men and the women. 6 was Naivas, 7 was Airtel, 8 was KCB, 9 was Menengai, and 10 was Apple. Now, this entire list, I could have debated a bunch of shit, but the most surprising one was Apple being at number 10. This, if anything, probably showed that they did not do this survey with just Nairobi babes or the ones that are just terminally online. If it was probably just the Nairobi women, I bet Apple would probably come at number 3 and remove Equity Bank, and Equity Bank would have been at number 10. To be quite honest, that's how I think about it, because over the past couple of years, there's been a craze of Nairobi people just trying to get iPhones left and right. And granted, yes, people have gotten them, whether new, whether old, whether refurbished or anything. But people are really, really all about getting into the Apple ecosystem and shit. And I see that happen so much. So even finding that Samsung beat Apple in this ranking was actually a little bit surprising. But interestingly enough, at least one thing that I noticed was, if you're looking at this entire top 10 list, you'd probably see that the one thing that was of the most interest was stuff that were to do with money. Because if you take M-Pesa, Safaricom, Equity Bank, and KCB, then that's all sort of money related. If you look at the next one that kind of stands out quite a bit is Samsung and Apple, because that's more mobile phone handset type shit. Then you can look at Airtel and Safaricom as service providers for mobile phones, so you can see people like to talk. Then you can look at stuff like shopping, and that's when you look at the Ajab, the Naivas, and the Menengai. You can clearly see that a lot more women seem to like brands that are more associated with money to a certain degree, or at least the obtaining of money, which is interesting. Normally I'd probably say, maybe it's just the women from Mount Kenya who are surveyed, but I'd believe it. A lot of women nowadays seem to be particularly interested in money, sometimes to a fairly unhealthy level, and this is proof that it's actually a reality. But all in all, this particular top 10 list was actually very, very insightful to look at, and if anything, it shows that if you really love your partner and you want to get her something really nice on her birthday, if you look at all of these things and you want to be super cost effective, just go and buy her ajab flour so that she can make chapos for you, because maybe she's the giving type. But if it seems like that is a little too in the kitchen or too misogynistic to kind of bring in, then just go and get a menengai soup. Especially since I know that one might be a little bit more quality and it might even be a little bit pricier. Because when you think about it, not only will it probably clean her heart from all of the toxicity that might be out in these streets, but she can clean herself real nice so that you can eat her real good. Or at the end of the day, if she kind of catches a feeling, at least you'll be like, that's bars though. But I feel like that joke only works with Kenyan guys who are into hip-hop, so I'm just gonna leave it at that and move it on to our main topic of this episode. Now, while I was on Reddit about 2-3 weeks ago, I stumbled upon a particular post, which I'll admit was supposed to seem a little bit more sympathetic towards the boy child, but it ended up kind of pissing me off at the end of it. Not just because of the comments, but the post itself actually did kind of annoy me to a certain degree. And actually, the title of the post itself, because it all just started with me just seeing the title, was, and I quote, "Boy child, you are on your own." So it featured a screenshot that had been taken from Twitter from the Microsoft Africa Development Center page, where they had written, and I quote, "In line with the theme for International Women's Day, we launched the Microsoft ADC WINS program last Friday. WINS, aka Women Inspiring and Nurturing Students, is a 12-month mentorship initiative for the upliftment of female university students in Kenyan universities. Hashtag ADC WINS." End quote. And that was what was said on the Twitter page. And this guy decides to write on the post and say, and I quote, "Is this fair? The neglect against the boy child is reaching alarming levels. Corporates are going all out to sponsor girls. Waiting for Microsoft to launch MINS, aka Men Inspiring and Nurturing Students for the Boy Child in Kenya." End quote. Now, the post itself, when I kind of looked at it, I was like, okay, I can understand it's for the boy child, but should we really be going at it like this though? But then you kind of start going to the comments and you're busy looking at some of the responses that are being given, and it's like, okay, some people are saying that this is just incel logic. Some people are busy talking about how, people are just favoring the girl child too much. And one of the comments that kind of stood out for me was someone who said, and I quote, "I've seen this narrative on Twitter and I almost fell into that trap. Let me tell you the truth. On the ground, things are very different. I recently attended a tech event and the truth is the women, introverts included, are more aggressive in terms of seeking connections. Additionally, they are more willing to help each other out. When you get into tech Twitter, every single day you'll see drama, and 90% of the times it's dudes bitching to each other. There's a certain guy with a blue check mark and it usually never passes a month without him having drama. To be honest, consider this. Some of these programs are being pushed by women who found it hard to make it in the early years. They want to create a safe space for the women who are coming in so that they can grow." End quote. When I saw that comment, I felt, this kind of does carry a little bit of sense. But the person who had originally posted this post on Reddit came back and commented on it and said, and I quote, "I don't think you are paying attention and asking yourself questions when you see what's going on. Why are the women more aggressive? What made them more aggressive than the boy child? How come the boy child is not equally aggressive? What has made the boy child distracted and given the girl child focus? How come prisons are full of men and less women? How come bars are full of men and not women? It is because Microsoft and other corporates have set out to make the playing field unfair for boys and give women an advantage. The boy child is humiliated and denied opportunities just because he is a man. A boy child just looks at how Microsoft has all kinds of programs for girls and nothing for him. It is a hopeless situation for boys. The right thing to do is to give mentorship based on merit. At the very least, give 40% of mentorship to boys and 60% to girls." End quote. Okay, so after reading this plus a bunch of other comments, I actually started to get a little bit riled up, not necessarily for the boy child, but towards a lot of the men that were busy talking about this. And to be very honest, this topic in and of itself, I'm actually very, very exhausted talking about it, at least on a social level. I don't talk about it much in the podcast, but especially when I'm outside of the house, whenever I'm having social conversations, whether it's with an Uber driver, a certain person at a certain place, a random office or some shit, whenever this topic comes up and I talk about it, I just leave feeling more tired than I normally do. And it's mostly because I feel like I've had this conversation with people for nearly a decade, because I started talking about this shit with people since like 2015. This is 2024. This is almost pretty much the better part of a decade, and honestly I am sick and tired of having these conversations, because I have had these conversations for so long and I've spoken so much about this topic that I've gotten to a point where I'm actually tired of talking about it, because on one end it actually started to seem very whiny, like us guys are just whining about shit, because I can't be talking about stuff like this day in, day out, year in, year out, and it's not like nothing happens. And on the other end, for the most part, whenever I talk to guys about that shit, like, guys will agree to it. Guys will be like, okay, yeah, it's definitely happening. And then they do fuck all about it. Like, how the hell are you talking about something that you're claiming is important, that we need to change, that we need to do something about, and the entire time you're just doing fuck all about it? Which actually led me to the point and actually conclude that a lot of guys today aren't trying to be aggressive. They're not trying to scoop up opportunities like this. A lot of them became very comfortable and became very complacent, because I guess maybe they believe that, they'll work hard in school and they'll get pretty great jobs and that's all they'll need to do. And they've just gotten to a point where they're not trying to do more. And that complacency is what's probably leaving us behind. Yes, there's definitely an aspect of competition that I'll probably talk about later, but that complacency is probably what's leaving us behind. Because on the comment that I mentioned, there was something that was said where this guy was mentioning that a lot of the women who might be trying to get these programs done are probably women who struggle to succeed in the industry, and because they struggle, they don't want the other young girls or young women to struggle, so they're trying to pave the way for them. And that's actually a pretty great thing. Which does make me wonder if maybe the fact that, women struggled and they're trying to open up opportunities for other women is probably the reason why most women are aggressive about this, and you find that they're excelling quite a bit. Which goes to show you that one of the main reasons, actually the main reason why women will have programs like this and women will continue to excel in the professional space, is because they're supporting each other actively and they're doing it on a continuous level. The women that came beforehand that struggled will always come back and they'll talk about how tough the struggle was and how they were like the only woman amongst a bunch of guys in an entire room or in an entire department or even in an entire company. But they'll talk about how they passed through, trials and tribulations and how they're doing so well and they're going to try and help other women. So they go ahead, they blaze a path, and they try to smoothen the path for the next set of women that are coming along. And they're making that easier for themselves. And because women are actually actively trying to support themselves, they will continue getting the help and they'll continue to give it to other women. Because guess what? If it looks like it's a good idea to help a bunch of women because they seemed underprivileged and because their stories seem like one of marginalization, of course they're going to continue getting support. And because a lot of corporations definitely see the benefit of doing this, not necessarily even from we want more women in the company, but also from a situation of developing inclusion and maybe to a certain degree CSR, then it just ends up working out that, having more programs for women is just going to look better for them. And guess what? They're going to continue doing them. And just by that alone, it means that guys aren't going to have as many programs that are specifically for guys. Now, don't get me wrong, it's not like every single woman will benefit from this, or even that many women will benefit from this, because at the end of the day, the professional landscape is still the professional landscape as is. So you'll find that, if you manage to create the right connections, then you'll end up going for more events and taking part in more of these programs, meaning that you succeed a little more. So provided you get into the right circles and you hover around the right areas, then you'll probably have more of these opportunities. But the fact that there's more of them trying to get even more women should definitely probably tell a lot of guys that a lot of these women are going to continue supporting each other and the companies are going to help them in that. And because it looks great for the company's image and it also looks good for the HR department as opposed to having one just for the boys, then they'll continue pushing it. And the unfortunate reality that we need to accept as men is that there's not that much support that'll probably come our way. Especially in the fields that have the most lucrative jobs, we're mostly sort of on our own there. And you might think that, Denver, you're not looking at this right. Oh, the boy child will get some level of support, or they're going to have to do it in future. And yes, maybe in the future, maybe a couple of years ahead, but right now, I don't see it happening. I don't even see it happening within the next 1, 2, even 3 years. Reason being, men have never really been looked at as quote-unquote victims in terms of public light. It's part of the reason why whenever people think of abuser, predator, they usually start by thinking of a man instead of thinking about it in a unisex way. It's a pretty big part of the reason why, even though you'll find that there's a lot of push for women to get into STEM fields, it's not like there's a lot of push for men to get into the HEAL fields. And by STEM, I mean science, technology, engineering, and math. And by HEAL, I mean health, education, arts, and languages. Like, there's a lot less of a push. It's not like you're finding conventions to get more men into HEAL fields. And yet, men are in like the single-digit percentiles there in terms of representation. So if we're not having a push to have more male teachers in schools, then what the hell makes you think that we're going to start having boot camps that are just for men in fields like software engineering or AI programming or some shit like that? If the fields that are lacking in men aren't even calling up and saying we need more men there, what makes you think the fields that are known for having men are going to start asking for even more men? So in essence, like, unfortunately, much as this statement sounds very shitty to say, we're kind of on our own here, as men at least. Like, the whole, we're going to have, more mentorships and more programs that are supposed to mentor young men is probably a bit of a pipe dream, because for us to get to that point, men would need to be seen as victims, or at least as underprivileged people, which in society today, I don't think we're viewed in that level, even though people talk about how the boy child is suffering quite a bit. And the unfortunate reality is, because the men that are doing pretty well are so focused on trying to retain their position or being above other men, it's like we're not helping each other come up, we're not trying to mentor each other, even on an informal level, and we're not trying to help each other out when it comes to opportunities, which, I'll be very honest with you, women are doing great in terms of sharing such. Like, I kid you the hell not. When you look at the opportunities where women stand to benefit, when you look at the products that women stand to benefit from in terms of like helping them on a medical level, in terms of skincare and shit like that, you find that women will always pass that information to other women, and they'll always be down to support each other, even when a woman is starting something of her own. And you see that happen quite a bit, and you actually never really know the true power of having the support of women up until you're someone that has a product that you're trying to push, and they actually just come in numbers and they want to support it. And I found this out back in 2020 through a YouTuber that I was interacting with that I had managed to become homies with, and his channel was growing pretty quickly. And I can remember one of the times when I had met up with him, there was something that was supposed to shoot together, and he was busy editing a certain project. And at some point, I actually noticed something, and I was like, yo, I noticed that you gear your content towards a lot of women, and a lot of the fans that you get, a lot of the people that comment on your posts and even comment on your videos are actually women. So the guy kind of turns to me for a quick second, then goes back to his editing, and he's like, bro, I kid you the hell not, the people that you always need to have in your corner whenever you're trying to grow are women. Because the people that promote you the most, the people that will grow you the most are women. Because the people that will share the most, the people that will send to their friends the most and recommend, content and products the most are usually women. So you have to be careful. If you treat them well, they can make you blow up. But if you treat them like garbage, they're the same people that can sink you down. And the moment the guy told me that, I kind of understood it. Of course, I know that there's contradictions and there's places where this doesn't entirely make sense or, shouldn't entirely be agreed upon. But it does actually show the kind of support that women give to each other and the kind of support that women give that can allow other women to grow. Like, at the end of the day, women are supporting each other and, they're being aggressive about it. They're telling each other, go, like, take up this course, get this certificate, go for these boot camps. And you find that their resumes are stacked with all of this experience and all of this on-paper knowledge that makes them look so good that even as they're busy recommending each other, it's like they are just helping each other stack up and grow. But when it comes to guys, Like, when you kind of think about it, how many guys do you see trying to recommend stuff to other guys and saying, you know what, go try this, go try that. I'm trying to get you into this spot or into this and this place. Because honestly, I don't see guys recommending stuff for each other. I don't see guys trying to send opportunities to other guys. Hell, I see guys choking on some opportunities because they're not trying to eat with someone else. They're busy trying to cut someone off from the deal so that they can make a bit of extra cash. And a lot of times you find that those deals themselves kind of catch water and they don't even go very far. Or they probably just stop, or even though there's a payout, the money comes, but it's not like it's used to like grow this guy exponentially beyond where he currently is. So you're just seeing that guys are busy trying to outcompete each other, and yet we should be working together. We should be trying to support each other. Like, you find in a lot of cases, your friend sets up a certain business that's offering a particular service, but you're still going to other people that offer it instead of taking your money to your friend. And this is something that I see with guys a lot. Like, we're not supporting each other and we're like, oh, you're my nigga and I'm really all for you. But at the end of the day, like, are you really trying to support your nigga when you're busy trying to take your money elsewhere? And, if the quality is bad, then go and you talk to him and you see how you can make the quality better. That's also particularly good support. If you're not offering criticism and you're not purchasing from dude, then are you really supporting them? Like, that's the one question that I usually like asking guys these days whenever they're talking about, oh, the girl child seems to have gotten so much attention, the boy child is being left. Like, are we trying to support each other even as men? Because minus the occasional, let me try and help my homie with a throughpa so that I can get a babe, or can we put some money into betting and see if we lose it together or gain it together, I don't see guys trying to support each other on anything else. Like, on the professional level, I don't see guys supporting each other. On the business level, I don't see guys trying to support each other. It's like everyone's busy trying to one-up the other person, and yet at the end of the day, the enemy is poverty. And if you have more of your homies who've made it, then it works out better for you than if you're the only one who's made it and your homies are all just struggling trying to get to your level. Like, personally, at the end of the day, for me, I think about it as, if I can help my homie win, then in some indirect way, I have won, because I'll probably benefit from them, not necessarily even right now, but I'll probably benefit from them later. Even though that doesn't happen, at least I've helped someone feed his family, at least I've helped someone advance themselves, and to some degree that can count as blessings that I'll end up cashing out in the future. And to be honest, the reality of it is women will continue winning professionally, in business, and in other areas because they support each other. And up until we start supporting each other as guys, as men, as brothers, if you want to think about it like that, then we'll continue lagging behind. There might be a few of us that will progress much further. There's going to be a few of us that can probably beat the storm and get out, much further than everyone else. But the vast majority of us are still going to be struggling, and we're always going to be steps behind because we didn't pull each other up, we didn't hold each other's hand and try to cross through the river, through the storm together so that we can get to the other side. Which kind of brings me to my conclusion to all of this. Men, we need to start supporting each other. And it's definitely not a want or a should. We need to start supporting each other just as much, if not even more, than the women support each other when it comes to multiple different things. So if it's in business, you can support as a consumer, you can support as a partner to the business, you can support as an investor. Support how you can. If it's in the professional sense, you can support someone by helping them either get a job or helping them move up in the workplace and stuff like that. If it's in the personal realm, whether it's helping someone in terms of mental health, whether it's helping someone in terms of getting, certain qualifications, whether it's opportunities to get better qualifications, then help each other. Otherwise, we're going to continue whining about how women are progressing faster and they're getting all of these unfair advantages and we're not getting any. Yet at the end of the day, the people that we have to support us are literally just us. So up until we do something about that, they'll continue winning, we'll continue whining. And much as some of the whining of women might have actually worked as a good strategy to get a lot of these opportunities, it doesn't mean that it'll work for men. And even though we might get support for the boy child, the reality of it is that support is probably years ahead, because not unless if we're at a crisis, I don't see that happening. And up until we get to that, we need to do something for ourselves. Otherwise, we might be waiting until the cows come home. Although, then again, maybe I don't understand fuck all about this, even though I've been talking about it for a bunch of years, so I want your thoughts on it. The DMs are open. On IG, it is at the breaktime_podcast. On Facebook, it is at the breaktime podcast. And on X, it is at Bagaka the D. Thank you so much for listening all the way till the end, and I will catch you guys on the next break.
But what I believe is that if you put a pastor and a prostitute in one room, one is likely to convert the other.